tell me, who is James Peters?
Yeah, so James, so now I guess I work as I guess you say sort of transformational coach, mindset coach, all falls into that sort of particular category. Obviously classified even on the kind of the therapy side. Work mostly with sort of entrepreneurs, CEOs, solopreneurs, a kind of main sort of target market. Um, I guess ultimately I wasn't doing anything like this sort of 6, 7 years ago. I probably was even probably further away from this type of work than ever was. Um, but kind of due to life situations, was kind of thrown into some very difficult circumstances without a particular tool set. Then going back that particular time, I had no I don't really know personal development at all. And yeah, I was suddenly thrust into a situation where you kind of go through a loss of a dad and a son very quickly, then accused of a crime I hadn't done, found myself in the police cell, found myself in a criminal investigation, found then myself in the courtroom, all stuff which I had no tool set and no real understanding of. Got out, obviously, the other side of that in sort of 2018. And then ultimately built a new life, which kind of led me down the path to, I guess, ultimately where I am now, which is kind of, helping others through traumatic situations. We wrote a book, kind of had that launched at the back end of December time, a real sort of self-help guide of what I used in, getting over, traumatic experiences. And now, yeah, kind of sort of given it sort of a bit of a life mission really now to, help and heal others through for these sort of more sort of adverse situations which we have in life.
Yeah, I was reading through a lot of your longer posts on Twitter during the week, and it was just constantly kind of shocking me how, like, from like the start of your story, obviously being in a jail cell and then losing a father and a son, to now helping what will eventually become pillars in society and CEOs and entrepreneurs. It's like it's quite a roller coaster, and it's quite funny how it led you to that path. Whenever you look at where you did come from.
Yeah, exactly. It was like obviously it wasn't a path chosen, but I don't think we are. I think when we're thrown into certain situations in life, it's because the universe is telling us like, hey, this is a different path, and then you have to put something. Something has to happen to have what I guess ultimately is a paradigm shift. Because yeah, I wasn't on this path. I used to be sort of do like executive headhunting. Was a sort of co-business owner. Everything really in life was going well. Six-figure plus owner. Didn't really have any struggles. And generally quite a good upbringing as well. So yeah, I generally had what I classify as quite a comfortable existence. And then suddenly, yeah, out of left field, I suddenly had like three sort of things happen back, which is ultimately back to back, which is somewhat unusual. But ultimately, with that, it kind of completely turned a world upside down, and ultimately led me to I guess what is called the journey within. Because obviously I hadn't done that before. I hadn't done any personal before self development, so kind of threw me into a path of having to go down this particular route, which I obviously never would have chosen. And then obviously once you kind of start that journey, it just things just start to happen, and more things start to evolve and change, and then kind of obviously led to me, to guess where I am now. But I guess outside of some of the other things I've done from a business perspective, is yeah, I mean obviously I've sort of done sort of numerous sort of ultra marathons, which I wasn't doing sort of 5 years ago. I was kind of somewhat into fitness, and I like doing marathons, and I probably had done maybe about 3 or 4 marathons at that time. But yeah, I threw myself into ultra marathons and threw myself into like a Navy SEALs training, and trekked Kilimanjaro a couple of times. and just like stuff which, you know, morphed. So I kind of suddenly realized that we were leaving so much on the table. Like there was so much more there physically and mentally, where we actually put ourselves under certain amounts of stress. But that is what the challenge in life is. You know, we don't choose that. Sometimes most ultimately we're kind of thrown into these situations.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that I don't really think that you get the option in most cases to choose. I think these things do happen naturally, and you have to kind of have the common sense to go for these things. But in kind of your world now, you're in quite a niche market of helping CEOs and business owners and entrepreneurs. Would you say that that kind of decision to market yourself in such a way came from? Say you mentioned you had a past where you were quite high up the corporate ladder. Would you say that living in that lifestyle and seeing those things, did that kind of make your decision to guide CEOs and business owners, people with high stress jobs?
It did really, yeah. I think it came from that particular path, because I think we see it more, especially in, you know, especially male as well, is, you know, generally we're kind of more reticent, you know, to reach out, or from an egoic perspective, we kind of think, oh, I don't need any help, everything is good with me, and kind of, you know, don't really want to sort of give that vulnerability away, especially when we're, you know, our own business owner, or doing well in business. We don't want to show more maybe that vulnerable side from a personal perspective, but we all have those challenges. And I think obviously at the time, before everything that happened to me, I was having challenges, but I didn't really realize them. I didn't really have that awareness. Like I didn't really, you know, obviously it's more common, or not more common, but people talk about it a lot more now. But there's stuff like anxiety and depression. I probably was suffering those a little bit anyway, but I just didn't really realize I was, because there wasn't, I wasn't in tune with my sort of feelings or awareness of that, because I hadn't really done any personal development. So I just found I was kind of more sitting in sort of silence and just having that kind of like that attitude of, let's just man up and get on with it. And it was only really when obviously the world changed that suddenly, you know, I remember, you know, when after that, particularly, you know, I was going through those particular circumstances, or I just instantly went to those more lower levels of emotions, became more reclusive, didn't really speak to people because I didn't really want them to know what was going on. But obviously that kind of drove me down more of a road to ultimately, you know, wanting to commit suicide. I just didn't want to be here. Like, I think when we go through certain situations, I just fell straight into that situation. Like I just didn't want to be here. I had no tool set. And it was only really when I came to the conclusion that I was sort of given, you know, kind of, I guess got to the point where I really wanted to, you know, to go ahead and finish it. But something held me back. And then I reached out for support. And once I actually spoke to someone, life changed, because once I was put myself in a situation where someone just listened, there was no judgment, there was just, it was just allow me to speak. I just, everything started to change from that moment onwards. And then once that, and then I sought more counselling and therapy, and ultimately kind of moved on from there. So that's really where I try to offer my support is, I have been there. I have been at obviously that lowest point in time when sometimes maybe you don't feel like you can reach out, or you haven't reached out before, and you haven't got that, you know, side of you where you want to be vulnerable with other people. And so kind of offer that assistance, really, that, you know, I'm always here for that support, because I kind of always wished I had someone like me when I was going through my struggles ultimately.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. To be fair, I do think that people nowadays, especially young people, obviously with the rise of TikTok and YouTube, they look at CEOs and business owners as this massive word that gets thrown around and still there's no meaning of kind of, they have so much freedom and there's so much resources and things like that, but they don't realize that these people are playing at life at 120% more than we are. Like everything they do is got risk and everything they do pretty much has got some kind of weight attached to it that could drop at any moment. I don't think people are understanding that. So just kind of thinking about the people that you are kind of helping and the people you work with day to day, is there characteristics of them that you can see in them that has brought them to the point they're at? Obviously, they've got success in their own right, but that could maybe have harmed their mental health to bring them to you seeking help at the same time. Like, is there anything that you think could cross over that maybe too much of a certain characteristic could negatively impact them?
Yeah, I mean, most people I guess, who I've worked with, I mean, it's varied really. When I first started out, it was generally, I generally worked with a lot more women. I think, because I think they were, but maybe I wasn't sort of as niche as or targeted as maybe I was now. But I think they're obviously more open to being a lot more vulnerable and sharing, and a lot more, open to talking about their challenges. I think over recent times and the people I've worked with, I found the majority of sort of men, what I would classify as middle-aged. I mean, I'm like 46 now, so I went through my challenges at the back end of when I was in my sort of late-ish 30s, and obviously at that time, I hadn't had any real challenges in life, to be fair, and so when they did come, I obviously had no tool set, and obviously then I kind of went through that, through that more spiritual journey, as it were. And I think that's where some people are, is that they've had success, they've had, success from a business perspective. And maybe they've had the money, they've had the state, they've had the cars, they've had the material items, but now they've had a traumatic event in life. Now this could be a loss of a person, loss of a family member. It's obviously can happen at any point in life. Probably more happens a little bit more midlife, especially with more parents or anything like that, or loss of a friend, or just loss of a close one, or loss of a job, or loss of I don't know. They've had the money, but then, or they've had the business, but then something's happened. It's wiped out. They've completely wiped themselves out, and they haven't had to deal with a traumatic event in their life before, and so those are kind of gendered people. So I'd sort of say, early-ish to mid-40s, sort of maybe chase success, or what they thought success was from societal perspectives, and then got to the point where they thought they had everything, the six figures, the cars, the house, the wife, the kids and stuff, and actually as deeply unhappy. And actually then they suddenly realize that there actually is a different journey to take, instead of looking in the outer world for what we think is success, realizing that actually the journey starts when we go a little bit more inward. So yeah, that's kind of really the majority of the kind of, I guess, where most of the work I do with people is. That's kind of usually their sort of background. I guess in a lot of ways, it's like putting the ladder up against the wrong wall. They've chased success, thinking it was going to bring happiness, but realised all along that actually they've been climbing the wrong ladder.
Yeah, one of the first questions that came to my mind whenever you accepted to do this was a question I don't have it anymore, because through obviously being on social media and stuff, I've met a lot of business owners and CEOs. But whenever I was a kid in school, I always thought this was the only way to true happiness. But it's probably you're probably the best person to ask it now. Does money and success solve all your problems?
No, it isn't, and I think societal does naturally pushes you that way. That's the way we're being brought up. Obviously, that's it's where we're sort of defined a little bit. Maybe the car we drive, the house we have, the family we have, the business we have. It's all kind of labels to sort of how we define ourselves, but it's really defined through society. Obviously, we have a lot of more. We live in the information age now. And obviously places like this and X and obviously other platforms, X in particular, I think, there's a lot of great information. People share a lot of fantastic stuff, where we can kind of move away a little bit maybe from, platforms like Instagram, for example, where it is more, everyone kind of is posting what looks like they're having a phenomenal life and they're traveling the world and they're doing all this, but actually they don't, it doesn't really portray sometimes the real inner feelings of that particular person. But you do generally, you find that, and I think it does come to a certain point in life when you look, a little bit differently. And I do think naturally it is somewhere sometimes, when we start to get into sort of latter 30s into 40s, and suddenly realize actually there's a different life to live. I think that's I think that's kind of somewhat the evolution of life, is when we start here, we're somewhat free, we're programless to a certain extent, but through our upbringing, through our sort of informative years, through our peers, through schooling, through our teens, through to our early 20s, all that sort of stuff, we're picking up more and more programs, getting more and more bogged down, until it gets to a certain point where that breaks, and that's usually a traumatic event, like the hero's journey to a certain extent. We get to a certain point where we realize actually that actually the journey is finding a mentor, is finding a coach, is finding someone to work with, going through those troublesome times, and then we have a complete evolution and change of paradigm. And so that's kind of obviously where the hero's journey comes in. So I think it's about understanding that journey really, because we're all going to face it at some point, because it's just the nature of the way we're set up. So, but I think through ultimately getting back, through societal type of expectations, and sometimes what we see from other people is that we think, the material world will give us what we want, where actually, that's not going to bring happiness within. Because I think I always believe that if you're relying on something outside of yourself to help you or make you feel better or make you feel good about yourself, whatever, anything like that, then you're going to be always at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I do think it is stereotypes like that. I know obviously with this new movement of social media, with the whole, I would call it hustle culture. I don't know what anyone else would call it, kind of forcing down you have to be working hard 25/8 a day, all day and stuff. But I think that it is derived from that question of, does it solve all your problems? And I don't think people realise that there is more to life and to solving problems than just money and success, that you can't buy away your problems. And a lot of people obviously now with these new movements that I'm speaking of, like, it's kind of forced down your throat that you have to be working hard all the time. But then they don't realise is, if you do that consistently, yes, you might be in a better position financially or environmentally, but once you have a situation where you have to turn that off, where you have to go back to being a normal human, you've pretty much programmed yourself to be a robot, a non-normal human. So going around normal interactions and normal situations now become terrifying. I know that obviously I've listened to a lot of podcasts in my time of CEOs and big business owners talking about how once they've left their box, i.e. their office, they've now experienced like crippling anxiety to the point where they've had to run back into the office and lock themselves in the building, things like that. I think that obviously now it's a lot more popular now to glamorize the cars and the hard work and the late nights and things like that. But with doing that, you're kind of casting a massive shadow over what's on the other side of that. Like what I understand that those things might look good for a picture or a video, but what are you going to do when the camera turns off? Type of situation. And I know obviously you're going to have experienced that in your own job now, working with these CEOs. So would you say that these new movements of social media they're maybe forcing people who are entrepreneurs or CEOs to adapt to, I need to show off a fancy lifestyle, or people are going to think that I'm sinking and not swimming?
Yeah, and it's a real balance, because I think it's being able to understand, yourself and where you are. I think when we go look at it, obviously, being with people at kind of end of life, or speaking to people who are on this business journey, and obviously you're burnt out, stressed, anxious. I always say to them, at the end of your life, on your deathbed, you're never going to say to yourself, "I wish I spent more time in the office," or "I'll just go and bring me my bank statement," or "Bring me my keys to my Ferrari," or "Bring me my, plaque on the wall to show that I was a best-selling author," or something like this, whatever it is. You're not going to ask for that, are you? What you're going to want the people around you who love you. And that's kind of a really powerful, profound shift to have, because a lot of the time you're chasing, or you're in that environment wanting, obviously the car, the house, all those status type symbols. But realistically, at the end of your life, all those things aren't going to matter. So it's being able to have, really what's important. What is important is, I always, is your, if friends, family, personal relationships. These are really, really, really important. Because yes, I've seen it before with people who have, chased success and had the money and had the status, everything's all well. But what they have now, well, they've kind of let go of their marriage, so now they've got the money to pay for a divorce. They've neglected their children, so now they have to buy them things to reaffirm their, their sort of children's love for them. They didn't spend enough time with them when they were younger. Their health's out the window, so now they have to invest that money into a personal trainer to get fit again. So it's just like, well, and realize kind of what was all of that journey about. It was, because now it's just now I say I've got a failed marriage, I've got my kids who hate me, and I'm kind of massively unhealthy because I've neglected it. So it's about really understanding that, that journey. And sometimes that's really where, when the shift happens, when usually something abnormal happens in the outer world, which then affects yourself to think, which completely has a shake up of your paradigm to think, actually, I need to live a different life. And that's usually when you maybe start more that inward journey. So it's being able to only understand that, really. And sometimes it's difficult to get there, because sometimes we can have an intellectual understanding of things. Like someone could listen to this and have an intellectual understanding, or that makes sense, or intellectual understanding because they've taken a course, read a book, or listened to podcasts or anything like that. Intellectual understanding, but we kind of know intellectual understanding doesn't really mean a lot. It's kind of when it hits emotionally and then a little bit more, that things start to change, and then and then we end up having to shift our identity. And so it just becomes who you are and what you do. So, but yeah, it's kind of, I think, always that journey, really, of understanding that sometimes it's not what we want to be chasing in the outer world, and realize that it's more the inward journey, which is the more path to take.
Yeah, you mentioned something there that sparked a memory I had from during the week. You mentioned that there could be some business owners who they look back on their life and they see failed marriages and kids who hate them. There was a clip recently that I saw that someone was giving an interview to someone I think it might have been on a podcast or a live stream, and he said that the only threat to a business owner is divorce. And it kind of did get me thinking that more recently, anyway, it's starting to become more apparent that there's a higher chance of divorce for these business owners. Obviously, everyone has their own beliefs and reasons to why this could be, but would, in my opinion anyway, I do think it is that not being able to switch off work mode. And I just wanted to ask if, in your experiences, have you found that that is the case, or is there another reason why some, like a majority of business owners, they do feel in relationships and friendships and things like that?
Yeah, naturally, I think it's a good question, because I think it's what we, when we do live, especially on, when we are, entrepreneurs or business owners, and there is that comes with a lot of pressure, a lot of, a lot of stress, and so it kind of becomes our life, really, and so with that, it can then, if we haven't got the awareness or the realization, it can impact, relationships, be it, with a wife or partner, girlfriend, and obviously with kids as well, because sometimes you're not present enough, in those certain situations, because you're always, you're basically always on the phone, or you're always checking emails, or you're always on, having conference calls or anything like that. So one of the most powerful things I sort of say to people who I work with is talk around segments. And we all have, particular segments in our day, for example. So there might be a segment where, okay, when you're on a phone call, and then you come off the phone call, and then whatever's happened on that particular call, if it's gone well or bad, then needs to then pause before going into the next segment, which the next segment then could be an email or catching up on certain things. And then the next segment is then moving on to saying, driving home before we get in the car. And then that's another segment, and a segment at the end of the car, you're back to sort of get back into the, go into your house, into your family home. That's another segment. So it's not to carry what's happened in the previous segment into the next segment. It's always having that pause at the end. So if you get off a call and it doesn't go well, before jumping into emails, have a pause, think, and then say, right, now I'm going to do emails. So you're not letting something which happened on that call go into the email side. And again, obviously in the car, if you had a call in the car which didn't go well, before going into your house, before meeting your family, your wife, and everything for dinner, it's having a pause in the car and then saying, okay, take a breath, think, and then you're not carrying what's just happened on that phone call in the car into your family home. So you're splitting everything up into segments. And that can have a really profound shift, because sometimes that's what happens. If something derails you in your day on a phone call, sometimes that can then just completely, go through the whole day. And you suddenly have poor relationships, you're lashing out on people, you'd have, which can cause issues. You may have a difficulty at work, which you brought into home, and then they have difficulties at home. So just always say to people, be aware and just segment each time, which can have a powerful shift.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is actually a decent way to plan it out. Saying you're kind of not neglecting anything then, and as a whole, then I suppose.
Always present. You just always, because you have that pause. So always, what I drill into people who I speak to is PBTA: pause, breathe, think, act. So any situation, it's like, okay, let me pause here, let me have some breaths, and I'll talk about 6-second breathing, which really is powerful. It can kind of really lower your cortisol and really kind of reduce your, get yourself into a more relaxed state. Obviously, I've been big into box breathing, so that's another thing. But then, yeah, pause, breathe, think, and then just have a think. Okay, right, breath. Let me just quickly think what I'm going to do. Okay, yeah, and then make that action. Okay, right, we're going to move on. It just gives you that time to not let something which has happened maybe as sort of in the previous segment go into the next segment. And so you're just always showing up as your present and ultimately your best self, your most, or your highest self to a certain extent, and not coming in with this kind of leading with maybe more your ego self. So it's difficult to sometimes do and implement, especially at the beginning. But if you can really segment that time, you can have a really powerful shift.
So we'll go back to something you did mention about how. some of the CEOs was to realise that they've kind of neglected their health and things like that. And from reading through your page and seeing this morning, you're still very active and you still are putting quite an emphasis on fitness as part of your lifestyle. And I wanted to ask you this because I think I noticed something on your page. Am I right in saying that you went through Hell Week?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I did a Navy SEALs Hell Week back in September 2022. So yeah, I think when I was on my journey, I came across this is probably back in 2019. I was on this real personal development sort of journey at that point. Was having a real thirst for knowledge and real thirst for learning. So I was consuming lots of stuff on YouTube. I was massive into people like Les Brown and really like the motivational speakers, and really got into people like Esther and Jerry Hicks or Abraham Hicks. And then Joe Dispenza and Bob Proctor, and so really got into a real diverse selection of different people from different backgrounds. Reading books, so I got really into reading like Ant Middleton's books from SES Who Dares Wins, and really was just like, what else did I get into? Got into books around running, just was really just had this as a real first knowledge. But ultimately, one book I picked up was David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me, and I read that, and I was in Bali, and I was just having this kind of spiritual retreat and just chilling out, and I was just like blown away by how powerful this book was. And I was like, who is this guy? And I was listening to him on podcasts, and obviously he speaks, the way he speaks is so, sort of discipline there, and so motivating as well. It's just like really hard and hitting, and it really hits you hard. And I just was like, wow, this is incredible. So I was in Bali, and I quickly went online, ordered a weighted vest. So it arrived when I got back, and I just started running. I just started getting in a weighted vest, and I just started running. And it really, then obviously ultimately I started doing ultra marathons. But then it led me to think, once I kind of started learning about the Royal Navy SEALs, and obviously followed him, and I followed someone like Mark Devine, and there's naturally there's quite a few others. And then I realized I found Mark Devine runs a place called SEAL Fit. It's in San Diego, and basically he's an ex-SEAL, but he used to also help the SEALs put through a Hell Week plan, because what they were finding is that people would just naturally, there was such a high percentage of people who were just quitting, and a lot of it was because they were physically fit, they were physically real physical specimens, but mentally they weren't there. They didn't really have the will to complete it. So he helped them put a plan together, but ultimately he runs a civilian Hell Week called SEAL Fit Kokoro in San Diego, and it's a 50-hour Hell Week. So I think actual Hell Week is 120. He runs a 50-hour one, and it's so I signed up for it, and did it in September. And it's just a real experience. It's just you just go through the full way, because it's intense. It's like a yin and a yang type thing. Like when it's on, and then you have obviously downtime as well. But there's no real rest. You don't sleep or anything like that. They put you into a lot of ice baths on a regular basis. But when it's on, it's intense, and it's you go through Murph challenges. You're rucking, you're running, your pull-ups, your press ups, squats. I mean, it's what you see really. Surf torture. It's that I probably had some real breakthroughs on there. Real breakthroughs, because I was probably always searching for something, and I'd never found it. And obviously you can sit and you can consume books, and you can take courses, and you can do all these different things. And that's why I started running and doing ultra marathons, because I was always looking for something more. I was always looking for that next evolution, to a certain extent, of the mind, breaking through some mental barriers. And you're not going to find that in a yoga studio, right? For example, right? You're going to have to put yourself in certain situations to see how you react. And I never really found it with ultra marathons. Like I got close, but never really found it. But I did find it in on that SEAL Fit Kokoro 50 hours, because once you kind of get over 30 hours in and over, or at least over 24 hours, and you start hallucinating, because it's just you don't really know what's going on, because you're just so tired, and you start seeing things, and it's such a weird, you go into a weird headspace, but then you're on autopilot, so you just keep going. So I did all this stuff like that, but I did like lots of different things. What else? Like back end of last year, I put myself in a boxing ring, did a boxing match, because I wanted to see what I was like in that situation, different, when someone's like basically trying to punch your head off. Did stand-up comedy for a while, to see what that's like, how difficult that is. Again, I was always had a real thirst for putting myself in difficult situations to see how you would react. But that was all really came from after reading that book, to be honest.
Yeah, that was the main thing I wanted to see. I wanted to ask you about how was the discomfort and things like that, because, and you mentioned it there towards the end about trying new things. I listened to the Modern Wisdom podcast, and the host Chris Williamson mentions how he tries to practice doing stand-up comedy, and I remember watching one of his videos and he was talking about it, and people were commenting, like, asking why he was doing it, and things like that. So in the next episode, he addressed that it's a situation where he knows he's not funny, but simply by being up there and trying to be funny and doing it without any reservations or anything, it's given him so much life knowledge, because he has to learn how to control his breathing for the nerves. He has to learn then how to control what he's thinking, because he obviously knows that he's not going to get the laughs that a top 10 comedian would get. But it was one of those things to put him into a situation where he does now seek those discomforts very regularly, it's almost just to build up his mental stamina more than anything, so he can go through more difficult parts of his life than without breaking effectively. But yeah, through that, I've obviously seen those hell weeks on YouTube and on TV, and the intensity is crazy. So would you say that, like, through that hell week, you kind of understood that you kind of learned how to deal with difficulties better and more efficiently by building that mental toughness over time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I do believe that. I think everything goes hand in hand. Physical fitness, mental fitness. I mean, they kind of walk down the same path, holding hands, really. And I think you can't really do one without the other. And I think you do. It helps you build mental resiliency, which helps you sharpen differently in life. And you have techniques. I mean, obviously, breathing techniques they kind of go through. I mean, obviously, again, probably one of the worst things about Hell Week is that people, naturally get ahead of themselves. So they have the first hour, and they just think, I've got another 49 hours of this, or for actual Hell Week, it's another 119 hours. And people just they just quit, because they just see that they've got so long to go. And I think it's just being able to always decompartmentalize. I think that's what I was trying to say. But it's like they always talk about one evolution, just focus on the next evolution, just focus on this evolution and the next. It's literally just focusing in the moment. So it's like setting yourself little micro goals to say, okay, right, I'm in it, and then you just focus on that, because if you start looking too far ahead, your mind just spazzes out. So, and it's again with ultra marathons, if you start running, you've only done a couple of miles and you still know you've got 200 odd to go, it's like, you instantly just freak out. And at that moment, it's just about focusing on one step at a time, 1 mile at a time, all that type of stuff. So, and once you can really get into that and and obviously link that with breath work as well, it sets you up in different situations, for life, because life is challenging, that it is just the way it is. Like, we don't know what's around the corner. We don't know what's going to happen. No one's got no idea. And I think when I went through my challenges, I obviously had no tool set for that. And I crumbled. And so it's always been always knowing that, with life, I'm going to have more challenges. It's just the nature of it's going to be. But this time, I'm going to have a tool set. I'm going to make sure that I've got a tool set to help with this. And that's sometimes where I do encounter, certain people, is the fact that we're all going to have life. We're all going to have those particular challenges. So why not test yourself now? Because the challenges are always going to come. Whereas naturally, I think as humans, what we do is we don't really do it. And then we get to where life gives us this massive, what we call a graduation event, go through a difficult, and then we try to help ourselves. I mean, it's kind of like, why don't you do it now? So always some sort of big advocate of people of being able to maybe, if they are in a good, comfortable, quite good situation, then test yourself. Put yourself out there, test yourself, put, whatever that may be for you. And obviously, you don't have to follow my path or anyone else's. Follow what's right for you. That might be a 10K, or it might be a half marathon, for example, whatever. And because it's going to build that mental resiliency at some point, because you're going to need it. You're going to need it. And I also think, if you do have, one thing which I learned as well, and that's only having the beauty of looking back, is obviously I don't have a son now, but obviously I would, if I did, then I would have a tool set which would obviously help him, or he would see me doing something and then kind of think, and kind of understand that, certain things which are needed. Because I think you can only, I always believe in generational changes. If you can change yourself as a person, that's only going to impact, the generations in your family going forward. Because again, you see it so often, generational habits. If someone's if their dad's an alcoholic, then sometimes they're an alcoholic, and they just run these massive generational patterns where someone needs to change that. Someone needs to take a hold of that and stop it. Why not it be you? And so, yeah, that's one of the things which I kind of learned, because obviously I didn't have the tool set when I had sort of my son. So I was never probably that present. I was always working. I was always doing stuff. And now I look back and think, if I was given the opportunity, to be in a situation where I was with dad again, I'd just do it so much more differently. It's being able to have, just to understand that a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, I do understand what you mean. I like that point about generational changes. To be fair, that's something I do think about quite often, and I guess you could say, from looking at your story, that you've definitely implemented that with the route that you've obviously gone down. And it's probably not as publicly glamorized, the role of helping entrepreneurs and CEOs and people of quite a high status in their mental health and their life in general. So something I definitely did want to ask you was, I would imagine that a lot of people that would listen to podcasts like this will be, it's in that kind of weird zone of your life where you know what you don't want to do with your life, but you're not quite sure of what you want to do anymore. You haven't quite found what that burning desire is in life that you want to achieve. So how did you know this was what you wanted to do, and how did you kind of create the role that didn't really exist that much in the outside world?
Yeah, exactly, and it's it's an interesting question, because this isn't a path which I've naturally chosen. It wasn't like, oh, I want to be a coach and help people. It just wasn't there. Like, be kind of inauthentic to say it was. It wasn't. I was probably, I always, like anyone, I was. Well, I can talk about myself, but I was probably quite, what would I say, self-absorbed, to a certain extent. I was probably less compassionate and empathetic to others. I was just kind of, I just hadn't really evolved emotionally, really. And I think that's the thing. I think we all biologically, we're growing up, year on year. But emotionally and spiritually, that's kind of on us, really. And if we don't obviously evolved down that path, we don't read certain books, we don't, we don't take certain courses, we're not into personal development, then actually emotionally we can still be a teenager. And I probably was at that point, even though I was sort of late 30s, I was probably emotionally still quite teenager. I was probably still wrapped up in my own little world, and worrying about me as a person. So I was thrown into this particular path, and obviously I had to learn and swim, quickly. And so I'm kind of, what I believe is just being able to offer someone like a roadmap to a certain extent, because I think in generally there's a lot of people out there who are probably in a very similar, very sort of similar situation. And I wasn't ready for what happened to me, and it's just obviously helping people who, who on that path out of maybe some of those difficult situations. But yeah, for me, again, naturally after I went through stuff like, counselling and, therapy, and then I had my first life coach probably like 2019 and stuff like that. And obviously I was telling him a little about my story. I didn't really know at this point what I was doing. I was doing a little bit of affiliate marketing. I was still doing some headhunting, executive headhunting work, which I was kind of, which had been my career pretty much for 20 years, whatever. But I didn't really know what I was doing. And he listened to my story and he was just like, no, you've got a really powerful story. There's a reason why you went through this. If you tap into that higher reason, then you've got a gift there. And I took it away and I started working on myself, and then just realized that maybe that's it. Maybe that's the way. I was given this opportunity, these gifts, to be able to then help other people through their healing journey. And then it's kind of just evolved from there, really. It's kind of, it hasn't been a set plan or anything like that. I'm always, always working on myself, and that never stops. I'm always consuming stuff and following people and having mentors and coaches myself. And it's just being able to continue to learn and evolve, and hopefully, that experience, and that content I put out or anything like that, kind of helps other people on that journey. Because I think there's a lot of people out there who do suffer, but suffer in silence. I think it's kind of a big thing to, not to be able to, don't want to show vulnerability, or don't want to show that they're, they may be struggling a little bit, or maybe think that, life's not going, according to plan. But if they can, I try to help, if someone sees my content and maybe sees my story or sees, sort of vulnerability or anything like that, it just triggers them to think, actually, it's okay to reach out. And it's all about, if that changes one person, it's all one person looks, sees my content or picks up my book, and they turn around and say, well, that shifted my mindset, then that's what I'm looking for, really. That's a win. And that's kind of all I focus on, really.
Yeah, you've obviously done a tremendous job in your field now, because you've been interviewed by the likes of Forbes and LA Weekly. Can you kind of explain maybe what that process and what is like, and what kind of feeling does it leave you with whenever you walk away from thinking to yourself, like, I've just spoke to Forbes, one of the most respected organizations in the world?
Yeah, it's just gratitude. It's just gratitude, really, and just being thankful that that someone is taking interest, and and obviously if it helps anyone else out there, then that's it, really. That's all I really look to do. I think I don't, sometimes naturally you can get quite egoic about it, but then always just have a little sit in silence to myself and just be grateful for where I am and what I've and that someone's interested, because I think. Yeah, I think there is a kind of a, I guess the stories. I think people just find the story very unusual. It is, and I guess it's just unique to a certain. I mean, obviously people do naturally lose family members and that, but I guess for 3 things to happen within 6 months, it's quite unusual. And I think that's why people help, and I think it's just because you can crumble after that, and I know that because it's a natural thing to do, is to be able to, sometimes those situations can have a real profound effect on someone, and can drive you down the wrong path. And I'm not saying, I did go down that path. I didn't want to be. I wanted to be somebody to take suicide, suicide, and I thought, I was on painkillers and sleeping pills and all this type of stuff. I kind of took or started that path, and something, and I just shifted the other way. But I think it's just always just grateful that people are interested, really. And if it can help someone, as I say, if someone listens and consumes any of the content, or sees any interviews I've done, and just thinks, wow, there is an opportunity. I just say, wow, there is an opportunity there. You can. I always say to people that a new future is always available. It's just a choice, and what's right and what's wrong is always available. To people. One of the powerful exercise I use with people is to say, right, I'll give you $10,000, for example, and you list me 10 things why your life sucks. And obviously, people can probably give me that in less than 2 minutes. And I say, right, I'm going to give you $10,000, but this time you have to tell me 10 reasons why your life is awesome. Now, that's more difficult. However, if for $10,000, you're going to you're going to find those 10 reasons. So now you have it on paper, in blue or black pen, whatever. And then it's just like, well, where do you focus? Both options are available to you, just where you focus. And I think obviously that can be the challenge, because obviously food, we have to always, what I understand is, we have a 2 million old brain. It's wired for fear. It's wired for survival. It's wired for, you're not getting eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. It's still there. We still have that brain. We just don't live in that environment anymore. But what is it? Well, it's bank balance, or it's this, or it's fear of being good enough, or criticism, or all this type of stuff. And so we are wired that way, but there's always a choice to be able to, to shift your consciousness or shift your awareness. And so yeah, I bet obviously just going a bit of a divert there from the original question. But yeah, I think when I do speak to these magazines or speak to people and obviously have some publication, it's just been grateful, really, that someone's interested, and as I say, if someone listens and takes it and has a takeaway or has a shift, or they come back to say, Jay said, that nugget of gold was, helped me, transform or anything, then that's what you're really looking for.
Yeah, it is quite amazing whenever you put it like that, to be fair, and I can imagine the feeling of it is, it's kind of as that kind of pat on the back for a well done on what you've done and stuff. And in those interviews, obviously, whenever you're speaking of yourself, and even interviews like now, like, do you kind of have those moments where you just kind of sit and think, like, how far you've actually came and how much you've actually achieved, and some would say like quite a short space of time?
Yeah. I mean, I think I always try to obviously have time for myself and reflect as well, because I think it's important to do that. And sometimes I do go back. Sometimes when you do, we're human. We have all. We're supposed to feel all the different arrays of emotions. Because so of course, even though I have the tool sets now, it doesn't mean I'm not going to feel difficult or have those more disempowering emotions. But it's just being able to reflect and just understand where I came from. Or where I was a certain period of time ago, because then you always be, you always, grateful for where you are now. And it's just being able to, just recognize that, I think, and just like, just always be, think, things could have been so different. I could have chosen a different route. I could have, things could have gone wrong, especially in a court scenario. I mean, that things can go wrong there, and just being grateful that the decision we got to was the right decision, and I can kind of move on a little bit, and but never forget it to a certain extent, because it's, you know, that was because sometimes when you can get caught up in certain things in life, it's easy to sometimes forget about that. But sometimes I always go back to that moment and think, oh no, you know, this is the right path. This is where I know I need to go. And as I say, it's just really being able to share that sort of journey with others, because you know, because you can always, I'm sure. I think what I learned one day, what was it now? It's like your story is someone else's, you know. I was trying to think of, I want to butcher it now. I think it's something like that. It's something based on about the challenges you face can be someone else's sort of, you know, empowering journey sort of thing. So it's just being able to understand that you know, you never know who's watching or who's listening or anything like that. And if something, you know, I share inspires someone else, then and has them a shift, then that's really powerful.
Yeah, it's definitely been incredible, and hearing your story and stuff now has been, it's amazing. I think that as the weeks go on and I kind of establish myself more in the podcast space, I definitely will bring you back on and kind of go into more of how you became this person, because it's quite clear there's a lot to unpack. But yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I think that people listen to it will, an insane amount of free knowledge they're being given, but just listening to you talk about how you help these people in quite high positions in life and have obviously gone through quite a lot of setbacks and struggles in a business standpoint, but probably helping in their own personal life, and it's something that a lot of people could probably take on board in their own life as well. So just kind of as a final note and as a leaving point, if you could say one thing to somebody who's in the position that you were once in before you obviously went on this path to where you are now, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing I learned, I know, and this is someone who, you know, wasn't that open to sharing or being vulnerable, stiff upper lip, you know, very sort of, you know, not sharing anything with anyone, is to speak. Ultimately, I think when I were able to reach out to someone and have a conversation, it really shifted everything for me personally. Beyond however I could imagine. So if you are struggling, you know, sitting in silence or just struggling in life, and you can't open up to someone, and you can't open to a partner or friend or anything like, which it's sometimes difficult to do. I think, you know, I had family around me, but it wasn't as though they didn't understand, because they did, but they didn't have really obviously the tool set. But also, we obviously, it was just a difficult time and all for everyone who was close to me. So actually, I think always finding someone who is completely neutral, you know, someone who you don't actually know, has no personal sort of emotions involved in the situation, for example, is actually probably one of the most powerful things, you know, you can do, is actually go to speak to someone who's just completely neutral and has no affinity to you, or but knows anything about your background. I think that can have a really powerful impact. I know it did personally on myself when I did that. So so that's really what I really sort of, you know, mention to anyone, is just, if you're in that situation, it's just having a conversation with anyone, because that can have a real profound shift.
Yeah, I think that's as perfect of a parting comment as we're going to get. Thanks for coming on. Obviously, the first episode, it's a massive help to get a guest like yourself, someone who's got a story like yours. The first episode kind of sets pace for everyone else. You know, I don't know if Kai's not in here at the minute, but he's got big shoes to fill next week whenever he comes on. So, yeah, thank you very much, James. Anyway, this will be uploaded on Spotify, so anyone who didn't quite get to listen to the live recording will get to when it's uploaded. It'll be on my page, obviously, and yeah, I think that's as good as we're going to get today, and I think that there's some serious knowledge in there that even I'm going to have to go back on and make notes for as well.
Amazing. Well, no, thank you for inviting me. Thanks for having me. And yeah, hopefully there is some nuggets of gold in that. And yeah, any questions, always just reach out.
Yeah, no problem at all, James. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.